The late afternoon sun hung low over the small frontier town of Red Rock, casting long, dusty shadows across the wooden buildings. The town was quiet, save for the occasional creak of a swinging sign or the distant clip-clop of a horse along the main street. The Saloon, the heart of Red Rock's social life, sat at the edge of town, its wooden doors slightly ajar, letting in a warm golden light that promised laughter, music, and the smell of strong coffee and dust. Inside, a few regulars lingered, nursing their drinks, whispering quietly about the day's happenings. Amidst this calm, a young woman named Clara adjusted her wide-brimmed hat nervously, standing near the saloon's back entrance. She had only just arrived in town that morning, her small wagon pulled by a tired but loyal horse. Clara had always been careful about her steps, her words, and the secrets she carried. Today, however, she had a pressing reason to be cautious. In her hand, she clutched a small bundle, wrapped in cloth. Inside was something valuable, something that could change her life if she could deliver it safely, but also something that could put her in danger if the wrong people found out. Clara's eyes flicked to the saloon doors. The noise of laughter and piano music spilled into the street, but she paid it no mind. She needed to find a place to hide, to wait for someone she trusted. Her heart beat faster as she pushed open the back door, stepping into the dimly lit storage area behind the saloon. It smelled of old barrels, dust, and the faint tang of whiskey. The room was cramped, with shelves stacked high with supplies, sacks of grain, and tins of goods. It was the perfect place for someone to go unnoticed for a little while. As she moved quietly among the crates, Clara's mind raced. She had been warned that there were people in Red Rock who might try to steal what she carried. She did not know who to trust, and every shadow seemed like it could hide a threat. A sudden sound made her freeze, a creak of the wooden floorboards above, the shuffle of heavy boots. Clara pressed herself against the wall, her bundle held tight to her chest, and waited. She could hear muffled voices, low and hurried, drifting down from the main room of the saloon. "Did she come in?" one voice asked. "I think so. Check the back," another replied. Clara's pulse quickened. She could hear the determination in their words. Whoever they were serious. She had to think quickly. She peeked through a crack in the wooden slats and saw two men entering the storage area. They were tall, rugged, dressed in dusty coats, and their hats shadowed their faces. One of them carried a lantern, which swung slightly, casting long, flickering shadows across the walls. Clara swallowed hard. She could not let them see her. Not now. She quietly backed toward the far corner of the room, moving as silently as she could over the dusty floor. Her thoughts raced. How could she get out without being noticed? The only window was small, high up, too far to reach easily, and the door would put her in direct line of sight. She needed a plan. The men stopped near the shelves, their voices low but sharp. "She's gotta be here," one said. "We'll find her." Clara's stomach tightened. She knew she could not fight them, not with the bundle she carried and not alone. She had to rely on cleverness, on staying unseen. She crouched behind a stack of barrels, holding her breath, her eyes fixed on the floorboards. She felt every heartbeat, every tiny movement of air, every shift in the shadows. The men were methodical, scanning the shelves, stepping cautiously to avoid knocking anything over. Time seemed to stretch. Each second felt like an hour, each footstep a drumbeat in her ears. Clara remembered the advice her father once gave her. In times of danger, move like the wind, unseen and silent, but always keep your mind sharp. She took a slow breath and remembered the small passage behind the oldest shelves, a narrow space she had noticed when she first entered. It was cramped, barely enough for a person to crawl through, but it might just be her way out. Clara moved inch by inch, pressing herself against the shadows, keeping her bundle close. She had to ignore the fear, ignore the trembling in her hands, and focus on the path ahead. She reached the narrow passage and slid into it, pulling herself forward slowly. The walls were rough against her arms, but it was worth it. If the men discovered her in the next few moments, she would be out of their immediate reach. Above, the men muttered and shuffled, oblivious to her escape. Clara felt a small surge of hope. She could hear the door at the far end of the passage leading to an alley behind the saloon. Freedom was close, but she had to remain careful. One misstep, one sound, and everything could be lost. As she crawled toward the exit, Clara's mind wandered briefly. How had she ended up here? Life on the frontier had always been unpredictable, but she had always believed she could face anything with courage. Yet this being hunted, threatened, was different. It tested every ounce of her strength, every bit of her wit. She had to remain calm, no matter how her heart pounded in her chest. Finally, the passage opened to the back alley. Clara paused for a moment, listening. The men's voices were faint but persistent. Still searching. She peeked around the corner, and the alley was empty. Her horse was tied a few yards away, patiently waiting. Relief washed over her like a warm wave, but she kept her body tense, ready to move quickly if needed. Clara grabbed the reins and led her horse carefully down the alley, keeping to the shadows. The sun was now lower, the sky turning a deep orange and purple. Townsfolk were beginning to head home, unaware of the quiet drama that had just unfolded in the saloon storage. Clara knew she had to keep moving, to put as much distance as possible between herself and those men. As she rode out of Red Rock, the wind in her hair and the soft thud of hooves on dirt, Clara allowed herself a brief moment to breathe. She had survived the first encounter, but she knew this was only the beginning. Whoever wanted the bundle she carried would not give up easily, and the journey ahead would test her in ways she could not yet imagine. But Clara also felt something else, a spark of determination, a glimmer of hope. She had escaped, for now, and she was clever enough to stay one step ahead. With each mile she put behind her, she promised herself she would protect what she carried, face the challenges to come, and never let fear dictate her actions. She was resourceful, brave, and willing to do whatever it took to see her mission through. The sun dipped behind the distant hills, casting long shadows across the dusty plains. Clara rode on, her mind focused on the road ahead. She knew that safety was temporary, and danger lurked around every bend. But she also knew she could handle it. She had survived this first trial, and that survival gave her strength. Somewhere ahead, beyond the hills and the winding trails, lay a place where she could finally rest and regroup. A place where her efforts would not be in vain. And as she rode into the twilight, Clara carried with her the knowledge that courage and cleverness, even in the most difficult moments, could light the path forward. The journey was far from over, but she was ready. Every shadow, every sound, every step was a test, but she would meet them all, one by one, and come out stronger. The open plains stretched endlessly before her, and for the first time in hours, Clara allowed herself a small smile. Knowing she had survived, she had fought with her mind and her will, and she would continue to do so, no matter what lay ahead. The night had fully settled over the rolling plains, and the stars shone like tiny lanterns scattered across the deep, endless sky. Clara rode steadily, the quiet of the open land both comforting and tense. She knew she couldn't stop for long. The men from Red Rock might still be searching for her, and she needed a place to hide until she could figure out her next move. The bundle she carried, carefully wrapped and tied to her saddle, pressed lightly against her side, reminding her of its importance. She rode for hours, guided only by the moonlight and the faint outlines of distant hills. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of sagebrush and earth. Occasionally, she would hear the distant howl of a coyote, and each sound reminded her that she was far from the safety of any town or familiar face. Yet, despite the solitude, Clara felt a quiet determination. She knew she had to keep going, that every mile she put between herself and Red Rock was a step toward safety. As dawn began to break, painting the horizon with shades of pink and gold, Clara spotted the outline of a small settlement nestled in a valley below. Smoke rose from a few chimneys, and she could hear the faint sound of a rooster crowing. She guided her horse carefully down the slope, hoping that the town, if it could be called that, would offer some temporary shelter. Her heart skipped a beat as she approached. She could not afford to draw attention, yet she needed rest, food, and perhaps someone to trust. The settlement was quiet but welcoming. Wooden cabins lined a narrow dirt road, and a few townsfolk were already beginning their morning routines. Clara tied her horse near the edge of the town, trying to remain unnoticed. She walked cautiously toward the largest building, which appeared to be a general store. Inside, the smell of baked bread and fresh coffee made her stomach rumble. She approached the counter, trying to look calm, ordinary, and not at all like someone fleeing danger. "Morning, miss," said the storekeeper, a kindly-looking woman with streaks of gray in her hair. "What can I do for you?" Clara hesitated for a moment before replying. I just need some food and a place to rest for a short while. I've been traveling a long distance." The woman's eyes softened, sensing her fatigue. "Well, you've come to the right place. You can rest in the back for a bit, and I'll get you some bread and cheese. You look like you've had a rough night." Grateful, Clara followed her to a small room behind the store. It wasn't much, but it was warm and quiet, a safe haven for the moment. She set her bundle down carefully, taking a deep breath as relief washed over her. Finally, she could pause, at least briefly, to gather her strength. As she ate the simple breakfast, Clara's thoughts returned to the men in Red Rock. Who were they? Why were they after her? She had been careful, but clearly, someone knew what she carried. The questions swirled in her mind, but she pushed them aside for now, focusing on the present. She needed to plan her next move. After breakfast, Clara stepped outside to stretch her legs. The townsfolk had begun their daily chores, sweeping the porches, tending small gardens, and feeding chickens. She noticed a young boy watching her curiously from across the road. He was small, with wide, innocent eyes, and seemed fascinated by her presence. Clara smiled at him briefly, before continuing her walk. Her attention was soon drawn to a man standing at the edge of town. He looked rugged and weathered, with a long coat and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. He seemed out of place, lingering near the tree line, watching the town. Clara's instincts immediately tensed. She couldn't tell if he was friend or foe, but she knew better than to ignore anyone who seemed too interested in her movements. Deciding to be cautious, Clara returned to the general store. "He's probably just passing through, but you look worried, miss. Is everything all right?" Clara shook her head slightly. "Just tired from the road," she said, masking her concern. But her mind was already racing. She needed to find a safe place to hide, at least until she could decide her next steps. The bundle she carried could not fall into the wrong hands, and she was determined to protect it at all costs. As the morning passed, Clara learned more about the small settlement. It was called Silver Creek, a place where people lived quietly, away from the hustle of larger towns. They welcomed travelers cautiously, but generally, the community was kind and honest. Clara felt a small sense of relief knowing that, for now, she could blend in. By midday, she decided to explore a little, hoping to understand the terrain and find possible escape routes if needed. Walking along a narrow path that led behind the town, Clara discovered a small creek, its water clear and cool. She knelt by the edge, letting her fingers touch the water, enjoying the brief moment of peace. The gentle babble of the stream contrasted sharply with the tension that had dominated her life for the past day. As she rested, she heard the faint sound of voices from the other side of the creek. Two men were approaching, talking quietly. Clara's heart leaped. She instinctively knew she needed to remain unseen. She pressed herself against the brush, the tall grass hiding her from view. The men were rough-looking, clearly not from Silver Creek, and their conversation made her blood run cold. "We heard she might be hiding around here," one of them said. "We need to find her before she gets away." Clara's mind raced. These were the men from Red Rock, and they had tracked her all the way here. She had been so careful, yet they had found her. She had to think fast. Crawling quietly through the underbrush, she moved deeper into the forest beyond the creek. Her bundle was secure, but her fear was real. She couldn't let them catch her. Not now. Not ever. Hours passed as Clara moved silently through the forest, guided by instinct and the faint light of late afternoon. She found a small cave, hidden among the rocks, barely visible from the main trail. It was not comfortable, but it would serve as a temporary refuge. She crawled inside, pulling the bundle close, listening as the voices faded into the distance. For now, she was safe. Inside the cave, Clara allowed herself to rest briefly. She knew she could not stay long, and she could not afford to be careless. The men from Red Rock would not give up easily, and she had to plan her next move carefully. But in this quiet, dark space, she felt a flicker of hope. She had survived the day, outsmarted those who sought her, and found shelter when she needed it most. As night fell over the forest, Clara thought about the journey ahead. She had miles to travel, dangers to avoid, and decisions to make. But she also knew she had the courage and intelligence to face whatever came next. Every obstacle, every challenge, only strengthened her resolve. She was determined to protect what she carried, reach safety, and complete the mission she had begun, no matter the cost. The stars appeared again in the clear night sky, guiding her as she planned her next steps. Clara knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but she was ready. She was clever, resourceful, and brave. And as she closed her eyes for a few hours of much-needed rest, she promised herself that she would continue to fight, continue to run if she must, and never let fear dictate her actions. The world outside was dark and uncertain, but Clara felt a small flame of hope within her. She had survived. She had outsmarted danger, and she had the will to keep going. And with that determination burning inside, she drifted into a light sleep, ready to face whatever the new day would bring. The first light of morning filtered into the small cave, illuminating the rough stone walls and the soft earth floor. Clara stretched carefully, feeling the stiffness in her muscles from the long night of hiding. Outside, the forest was alive with the sounds of birds chirping, leaves rustling, and the distant calls of animals starting their day. For a brief moment, Clara allowed herself to take a deep breath and appreciate the calm. Knowing it might not last long, she carefully unwrapped her bundle, inspecting it to make sure it was safe and secure. Everything remained as she had packed it, neat, intact, and protected. That small reassurance gave her a surge of confidence. She knew the men from Red Rock would be relentless, but she was clever and determined. Today, she planned to move farther from the forest and find a more permanent hiding place. Somewhere she could plan her next steps without constant fear. Clara packed her few belongings into a small satchel and slung it over her shoulder. She looked around the cave one last time, noting its small exit that led to a narrow trail through the woods. Quietly, she slipped out, careful not to disturb any branches or rustle leaves that might alert someone to her presence. The forest seemed endless, but she had memorized the small landmarks near the creek the previous day. With careful steps, she retraced her path, moving cautiously toward the valley where Silver Creek lay hidden below. As she moved through the dense trees, Clara kept her senses sharp. Every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves made her pause. The memory of the two men searching for her yesterday stayed fresh in her mind. They had not given up, and she had to remain vigilant. Yet she also knew she could not allow fear to paralyze her. Each step she took, each careful movement, was a test of patience and focus. By mid-morning, Clara reached the edge of a small river that ran through the forest. Its waters sparkled under the sun, and she could hear the gentle sound of flowing currents. She knelt by the riverbank to drink and refresh herself, enjoying a moment of peace. While she rested, she surveyed the surrounding area for any signs of danger. There were no tracks, no footprints, and the forest seemed undisturbed. It gave her a small sense of relief, and she allowed herself to move a little faster, confident that she had shaken off any immediate threat. Clara continued along the river, following its curve as it led her toward open land. The forest eventually thinned, and rolling hills stretched out before her, dotted with wildflowers and tall grasses swaying in the morning breeze. The sun had risen high now, and its warmth was comforting after the cool, damp air of the forest. Still, Clara remained alert. She had learned that appearances could be deceiving. Even in open spaces, danger could wait silently. As she crested one of the hills, Clara spotted a small cabin in the distance. Smoke rose lazily from its chimney, and the surrounding land appeared well kept. It seemed isolated, but inviting, a perfect place to seek guidance, food, or perhaps shelter for a short time. Clara approached cautiously, scanning the area for any signs of hostility. She needed allies, but she had to be careful who she trusted. Reaching the cabin, she knocked lightly on the wooden door. After a moment, a middle-aged man with a kind face and a weathered coat opened it. "Good morning," he said, his voice warm but curious. "Can I help you?" Clara smiled faintly. "I'm traveling and could use a little rest, food, and maybe some advice. I've been on the road for a long time." The man studied her for a moment, then nodded. "You look tired. Come inside. We don't get many travelers out here. I'm Thomas, and this is my home. You're welcome to stay for a while." Inside, the cabin was simple but cozy. A small fire crackled in the hearth, and the smell of herbs and cooking bread filled the air. Clara sat down, grateful for the warmth and the comfort of human company. She ate slowly, savoring the food, while Thomas offered gentle conversation. Clara didn't reveal much, careful to protect the secret of the bundle she carried. Yet, even in small talk, she found comfort in the normalcy of the man's life. After breakfast, Clara decided to explore the nearby land. Thomas had a small farm attached to his cabin, with chickens pecking at the ground and a few cows grazing in the pasture. Clara walked among them, enjoying the feeling of solid earth beneath her boots. As she worked quietly, helping with small tasks, she felt a sense of belonging, even if only for a brief moment. It reminded her why she was determined to complete her journey. She wanted a life that was safe, honest, and filled with hope, far from the dangers that had chased her. In the afternoon, Clara noticed movement on a nearby hill. She paused, her instincts alert. A figure was walking slowly through the grass, carrying what appeared to be a rifle. Clara ducked behind a fence, heart pounding. She watched carefully, trying to judge whether this was a threat or merely someone passing by. As the figure came closer, she realized it was a lone hunter. He seemed unaware of her presence, focused on tracking game. She let out a small breath, relief washing over her. Despite the brief scare, Clara knew she couldn't stay long. She had to keep moving, find a more secure place, and continue her journey. As evening approached, she thanked Thomas for his hospitality. "You've been very kind," she said, fastening her satchel. "I must continue my journey, but I will remember your kindness." Thomas nodded. "Safe travels, Clara. Be careful out there. The world is full of surprises, some good, some dangerous. Trust your instincts. They will guide you well. Clara stepped out into the cool evening air. The sun was setting, painting the sky in vibrant shades of orange and purple. She could feel the tension in her body slowly ease, knowing she had survived another day. Yet, she also knew the journey ahead would not be easy. The men from Red Rock were still out there, persistent and determined, and she had to remain vigilant. As she walked along the dirt path leading away from the cabin, Clara considered her options. She could take the main road to a larger town, but that might expose her to more danger. Alternatively, she could follow the hills and valleys, using the natural landscape for cover. She chose the latter, trusting her knowledge of the land and her instincts to guide her safely. Night fell, and Clara found herself in a dense grove of trees. The darkness was complete, broken only by the faint light of the stars above. She set up a small camp, careful to remain hidden and quiet. The forest was alive with nocturnal sounds, owls hooting, leaves rustling, and small creatures moving through the underbrush. Clara listened carefully, alert to any sign of danger. The men could still be following her, and she had to assume they would not give up easily. Before sleeping, she checked her bundle once more. Everything was intact, and she felt a renewed sense of determination. She had survived so far, outsmarted those who pursued her, and found temporary safety. Each challenge made her stronger, sharper, and more prepared for what lay ahead. She knew that tomorrow would bring new tests, but she was ready. Lying under the trees, Clara thought about the journey she had already traveled. Every step had been difficult, every moment filled with uncertainty. Yet, she also recognized her own resilience. She had courage, intelligence, and the will to protect what was important. With these qualities, she knew she could face whatever dangers awaited her, no matter how daunting they seemed. As sleep finally claimed her, Clara allowed herself a moment of peace. The journey was far from over, but she had proven to herself that she could survive, adapt, and move forward. The world was wide, the challenges many, but she was capable, brave, and clever. And with that belief, she drifted into a quiet, deep sleep, ready to face the new day, with courage and determination. The sun had barely risen over the horizon when Clara awoke. The forest around her bathed in a soft, golden light. The dew clung to the grass and leaves, sparkling like tiny diamonds. She stretched carefully, feeling the stiffness in her muscles from days of constant travel, hiding, and vigilance. Even though her body ached, her mind was alert and ready. She knew that today would be another day full of challenges, and she needed to remain focused if she wanted to stay safe. Clara packed her belongings, securing her bundle tightly to her saddle. She knew she couldn't linger too long in one place. The men from Red Rock had shown determination in tracking her, and she had to assume they would continue to pursue her relentlessly. Her goal today was to reach the next settlement, a small town rumored to be several miles east, where she could rest, gather supplies, and perhaps find someone trustworthy to help her plan the next stage of her journey. As she moved through the forest, the early morning air was cool and refreshing. The path ahead was narrow and uneven, winding through hills and small valleys. Clara relied on her memory of the land and instinct to guide her, taking care to avoid making any unnecessary noise. Each step she took was deliberate, careful, and calculated. She knew that one misstep could reveal her position, and she had no intention of letting that happen. By mid-morning, Clara reached a clearing. The land opened up, revealing a wide expanse of prairie, stretching as far as the eye could see. The wind whispered across the tall grasses, carrying with it the scent of wildflowers and fresh earth. Clara paused for a moment, allowing herself to breathe deeply and take in the view. It was beautiful, yet she remained alert, knowing that such open spaces could also hide danger. As she crossed the prairie, she noticed tracks in the soft soil. They were faint, but unmistakable footprints, and the occasional wagon mark. Clara's heart quickened. She studied them carefully, trying to determine how recent they were and whether they belonged to the men she had been avoiding. Her mind raced with possibilities. If they were indeed the same men, she needed to change her route, find cover, and remain unpredictable. Clara altered her path slightly, moving toward a line of trees in the distance. The trees offered shade, cover, and a sense of security that the open prairie could not. As she approached, she noticed a small creek running through the grove. Its waters were clear and cool, and she took a moment to rest, letting her horse drink and refresh itself. The sound of flowing water was soothing, offering a brief reprieve from the tension that had dominated the past several days. While resting, Clara observed the surrounding area carefully. She saw no signs of immediate danger, but she knew better than to assume she was completely safe. The men from Red Rock were cunning, and their determination could not be underestimated. She made a mental note of possible escape routes, hidden paths, and natural cover in case she needed to flee quickly. Preparation was everything, and Clara had learned that lesson well. After a brief rest, she continued her journey, following the creek as it wound through the hills. The forest gradually thinned, and the terrain became rockier, with small cliffs and boulders scattered across the land. Clara moved cautiously, her senses alert for any unusual sounds or movements. She knew that traveling through such terrain could be dangerous, but it also offered opportunities for concealment and safety that open spaces did not. Around midday, Clara spotted a figure in the distance, walking along a narrow trail. She crouched behind a large boulder, studying the person carefully. It was a young man, perhaps no older than 20, carrying a satchel and leading a mule loaded with supplies. He appeared cautious, scanning the surroundings as he walked, and Clara sensed that he might be trustworthy, or at least not immediately threatening. Deciding to take a risk, she approached slowly, keeping her movements calm and deliberate. "Hello," she called softly, keeping her voice friendly. "I'm just passing through, and could use some help finding the next town." The young man looked up, startled at first, then relaxed slightly. "You're not from around here, are you?" he asked. "I'm David. I know the way to the next settlement, but it's not easy to reach. The terrain is rough, and there are dangers along the way." Clara nodded. "I can handle rough terrain. I just need someone who knows the land and can guide me safely." David studied her for a moment, then smiled. "All right, I'll help you. But we need to move carefully. There are bandits and other troublemakers in these hills. It's not a place for the unprepared." Together, they set off along the trail, moving steadily through the hills and valleys. David pointed out landmarks, hidden paths, and safe spots to rest. Clara listened carefully, learning quickly. The pair developed a rhythm, walking in silence at times, speaking sparingly at others. Clara found comfort in having another person with her, someone who understood the dangers of the land and could help navigate the challenges ahead. As afternoon approached, the sky darkened slightly, clouds gathering on the horizon. Clara sensed a change in the atmosphere, a shift that suggested a storm might be approaching. She and David decided to seek shelter in a small cave they had passed earlier, one that offered protection from wind and rain. Inside, they huddled together as the storm rolled in, listening to the sound of rain pounding against the rocks and the occasional rumble of distant thunder. While the storm raged outside, Clara and David shared stories of their pasts. Clara spoke cautiously, revealing just enough about her travels to build trust without giving away the secret of her bundle. David shared tales of life on the frontier, the challenges he had faced, and the skills he had learned to survive in such a harsh environment. Despite the tension and danger, a sense of camaraderie began to grow between them. By evening, the storm had passed, leaving the forest fresh and glistening with rain. Clara felt a renewed sense of energy. She had survived the day's journey, navigated difficult terrain, and gained the trust of someone who could help her. Yet, She knew the challenges were far from over. The men from Red Rock were still out there, persistent and determined to catch her. She had to remain vigilant, clever, and ready for whatever lay ahead. As night fell, Clara and David made a small camp near the creek, carefully hidden among the trees. Clara checked her bundle once more, ensuring it was secure. She felt a sense of pride and relief. She had overcome obstacles, outsmarted danger, and continued moving forward, despite fear and uncertainty. The journey was still long, but she knew that courage, intelligence, and careful planning could guide her safely through the challenges ahead. Lying under the stars that night, Clara reflected on everything she had experienced so far. Each step, each decision, each challenge had made her stronger, sharper, and more determined. She had learned the value of patience, observation, and trust. And she knew that no matter how difficult the path ahead might be, she had the strength and wisdom to face it. The world was wide, full of unknown dangers, yet also full of opportunities and allies. Clara understood that her journey was not just about reaching a destination, but about learning, growing, and surviving with courage and determination. With that thought in mind, she closed her eyes, allowing herself to rest and regain strength for the challenges the next day would bring. Morning broke over the hills with a soft golden light, painting the forest in shades of warmth and hope. Clara awoke, stretching her stiff muscles from the previous day's long trek and the night spent in the small hidden camp. Beside her, David stirred, rubbing his eyes and yawning. Despite the discomfort of traveling and hiding constantly, both felt a sense of cautious optimism. Today, they were closer to their destination, the next settlement, where Clara could finally rest and plan her next steps more securely. Clara checked her bundle carefully, ensuring that nothing had been disturbed overnight. Every precaution mattered. The journey had taught her that even small mistakes could lead to disaster. As she packed, she reflected on how far she had come. The forest, the hills, the prairie, they had all tested her endurance, her courage, and her cleverness. Yet each challenge had also strengthened her resolve. She knew she was capable of facing whatever lay ahead. By mid-morning, the pair began their trek again, moving carefully along a narrow trail that wound through the hills. David led the way, pointing out hidden paths and advising on the safest routes. Clara followed, alert to every sound and movement in the environment. The forest was alive, birds singing, leaves rustling, and small animals scurrying through the underbrush. The beauty of the land was a comforting contrast to the tension that had dominated their journey for so long. As they walked, Clara and David talked quietly. They shared stories about their lives, their families, and their dreams. David spoke of his childhood in the frontier, learning to survive in a harsh but beautiful land. Clara shared memories of simpler times before she had to take on this dangerous journey. Speaking together helped ease the tension, creating a bond of trust and companionship. It reminded Clara that even in a world filled with danger, kindness, and friendship could still exist. Around midday, they reached a rocky ridge overlooking a wide valley. The next settlement lay just beyond the hills, a small town with wooden buildings, smoke rising from chimneys, and the faint sound of people going about their daily routines. Clara's heart lifted at the sight. They were nearly there. After days of traveling through forests, prairies, and hills, a safe place was finally within reach. However, the journey was not without its challenges. As they descended toward the valley, Clara noticed movement near a cluster of trees along the edge of the trail. She froze, motioning to David to stop. Through the shadows, she saw two figures, clearly men watching their approach. Her pulse quickened. She recognized the way they carried themselves, the determined energy in their steps. These were the men from Red Rock, still tracking her after all this time. David noticed her tension. "We need to be careful," he said quietly. "Do you see them?" Clara nodded. "They're close. We need a plan." Using the terrain to their advantage, Clara and David ducked behind rocks and low shrubs, carefully maneuvering to remain unseen. Clara's mind worked quickly, analyzing escape routes, cover points, and possible distractions. They needed to reach the settlement without being caught. The men were relentless, but Clara had learned the value of patience and observation. One wrong move, and they could be discovered. Clara spotted a narrow, less visible path leading through the trees and rocks toward the edge of the settlement. Whispering to David, she suggested they take it, knowing it would allow them to approach the town from an unexpected direction. David agreed, and together they moved cautiously, each step deliberate, silent, and careful. The men from Red Rock were close, but Clara's cleverness and awareness gave her confidence. As they crept along the path, Clara noticed the settlement coming into clearer view. People were busy with their daily tasks, tending gardens, sweeping porches, and chatting quietly. The noise of normal life provided a cover, masking the faint sounds of their approach. Clara felt her heart lift. They were almost safe. Just as they neared the town's edge, one of the men spotted movement. Clara froze, instinctively pressing herself to the ground. The man raised his head, scanning the area. For a tense moment, it seemed as if they had been discovered. But David, quick-thinking and steady, threw a small rock toward the opposite side of the trail. The sound drew the man's attention away, giving Clara the opportunity to move forward. With careful precision, they slipped through the final stretch of trees and emerged into the open space of the settlement. Relief washed over Clara as she realized they had made it. They were safe, for now. People passed by, unaware of the danger that had followed them across miles of land. Clara and David quickly moved toward the center of town, finding shelter in a small inn that offered food, warmth, and safety. Inside the inn, Clara finally allowed herself a moment to breathe deeply. She set her bundle down and looked around, seeing the faces of people who lived ordinary lives, free from the constant threat of pursuit. For the first time in days, she felt a sense of normalcy. The innkeeper welcomed them, offering hot food and a place to rest. Clara accepted gratefully, her body and mind exhausted but relieved. As they settled in, Clara and David discussed their next steps. They knew the men from Red Rock might continue searching, and they had to be cautious. But for now, the priority was rest, replenishment, and planning. Clara also reflected on how much she had grown during this journey. She had faced fear, danger, and uncertainty. Yet she had remained clever, brave, and determined. She realized that her courage had carried her this far, and it would continue to guide her. Over the next few days, Clara regained strength and energy. She learned about the town, its people, and its routines. She found allies who could be trusted, and she carefully planned the next stage of her journey. The lessons she had learned, vigilance, patience, cleverness, and courage, remained at the forefront of her mind. Every decision she made was influenced by the experience of being pursued, by the knowledge that the world could be both beautiful and dangerous. One evening, Clara stood outside the inn, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was painted in shades of orange, pink, and purple, reflecting off the distant hills. The air was warm and calm, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves. She felt a sense of accomplishment. She had survived, protected what was important, and found safety despite the dangers that had followed her. The journey had been difficult, but it had made her stronger, wiser, and more determined. David joined her, sharing a quiet smile. "You've been incredibly brave," he said. "Not many could have made it this far with what you've carried and faced. You've shown courage and cleverness every step of the way." Clara smiled back, feeling the truth in his words. "It hasn't been easy," she admitted, "but every challenge taught me something. I've learned to trust myself, to think quickly, and to never give up. I know there will be more obstacles ahead, but I feel ready for them now." Together, they watched the stars begin to appear in the night sky. Clara felt a quiet determination and hope. She had survived the pursuit, reached safety, and learned the value of courage and careful planning. The journey had changed her, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. She knew she was stronger, wiser, and ready to face whatever the future held. As she lay down to rest that night, Clara reflected on her journey, the forests, the hills, the open prairies, the dangers she had faced, and the allies she had found. She understood that life would continue to challenge her, but she had proven to herself that she could endure, adapt, and succeed. With that knowledge, she closed her eyes, feeling a sense of peace and accomplishment. The world was still vast and full of unknowns, but Clara's courage, intelligence, and determination would guide her forward. She had faced fear, outsmarted danger, and protected what mattered most. And as she drifted into a deep sleep, she carried with her the certainty that she could handle whatever came next, confident in her strength and resourcefulness. The journey was complete for now, but Clara knew that her story, like the endless horizon before her, was only just beginning. She had survived, she had thrived, and she had proven that courage and cleverness could overcome even the most persistent dangers. And with that knowledge, she slept peacefully, ready to face the adventures of tomorrow.